Hi, everyone. My name is Ethel Villafranca, and I'm a museologist. That is someone who studies museums. I recently completed my PhD at the University of Melbourne, and my research focused on teaching strategies of museums that school teachers can adopt in their classroom practice to help students engage with learning on a deeper level. I'm also the curator and the exhibition manager of the Museum of Chinese Australian History here in Melbourne, Australia. So, although I have been working in museums and libraries since 1998, whenever I speak to other gallery, library, archives, and museum or GLAM practitioners, I always learn something new or find something different from my own experience and studies. And over the years, I still get asked questions like, how does one become a curator? Or why is it dark inside exhibition galleries? Or even, is it okay to have fun while visiting museums? And lately, I also get asked, what is a museum educator? So I thought, why not invite GLAM friends and colleagues from different parts of the world so we can talk about the work that we do. And that's how GLAM Chat came about. So if you have questions, drop them in the comments below and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And today, our very first episode, I am quite thrilled to be chatting with very good friend, Ricky Francisco. Ricky and I go way back. We both started our career in the glam sector during the late 1990s at the Ayala Museum in the Philippines. Ricky initially focused deeply on collections care, not scare, and even trained internationally as an art conservator. He has conducted numerous training programs to assist fellow museum workers across the Philippines on how to take care of collections. However, he has also held various roles that involve creating public programs, fundraising, development, and exhibition design. In fact, he has nurtured a successful career as an independent curator with exhibitions in major museums across the Philippines, as well as in notable art events overseas. So I am very thrilled to have my very good friend Ricky with us. Bear with me. This is the first time I'm doing a live broadcast, so it might be a little bit glitchy, but here we go. Hi, Ricky.
Hi, Ethel. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for having me as the first guest of Glam Chats. It's such an honor. Thank you so much.
Um, Ricky, thank you for agreeing. You were the first person I asked. In fact, I was just asking you if it was going to be a good idea to do this crazy idea I had. And without question, you said yes. So thank you so much. And to everyone watching us right now, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be talking about a lot of things, exhibitions, the different things, the projects that we've done together or separately. And you can ask us questions down in the comments below. You can also say hi to us and let us know where you are watching from anywhere in the world. Now, Ricky, first question. Okay, so my first question is, right now you are the director and curator of Sanso, Fundacion Sanso in the Philippines. Can you tell us a little bit about what your day looked like pre-COVID?
Okay. Well, first of all, again, thank you, Ethel. This is such a great idea to put together this kind of informal talk so that people could see what happens behind the scenes. Fundacion Sanso is a very small private art museum located in San Juan, Metro Manila, and we focus primarily on the art and the legacy of Juvenal Sanso, who is a 90-year-old artist born in Spain, but grew up here in the Philippines and had an international career. He had exhibitions in Paris, in London, in various cities in America, even in Mexico, and here in the Philippines. And he has been given several awards internationally, including the Cross of Isabella by the King of Spain, a Knight of Arts and Letters by the government of France, and the Presidential Medal of Merit here in the Philippines. Okay, prior to COVID, our workday was usually we started work at around 10. We open to the public every day from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Our entrance is free, and we have exhibitions, educations programs, and authentication services. Um, People visit us mostly for authentications and to buy our merchandise. And during prior to COVID, all of us went to work, and we started our day with uh, actually quite hurriedly because there's always something to do in the museum. Unlike what people think that it's a boring place, it's actually very active, and there's no day that's the same. Hmm.
Maybe it's the serenity of the place. Like, it's very quiet, and, it encourages you to be contemplative. So they think that, everything's so quiet, even, behind the scenes. But it's actually not true. There's never enough time to do all the things that we need to do in a day.
Yes. Uh, there's so much to do. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. For example, preparing for exhibitions, of which we have a lot. We have a lot of on site exhibitions, which means we have exhibitions in the museum, and we have off site exhibitions, such as in the malls or in schools. And last year alone, we joined in several fairs, art fairs as well as trade fairs. We always believe that we have to reach out to our audiences in order to serve them better. So that's, I think, one of the things that separates us from many museums. We join in many commercial ventures such as art fairs and trade fairs so that we can reach out.
And so you're involved in exhibitions. What else do you do for the museum?
Well, we have several programs. We have a scholarship program, which we piloted in 2018. We started with only 4 art students, and now we support 14 in the Bulacan State University. We also have what we call the Sanso idea platforms, which range from mental health talks to semi-small, to really small exhibitions, pop-up exhibitions. We also have Sanso Idea platforms catering to museum workers, so that there's fundraising, which one of which you headed, right? And we also have art handling workshops. Actually, we have so many things going on aside from the usual exhibitions and exhibition-related education programs. Yeah.
Now, how has this changed when the pandemic happened? And before that, though, can you tell us a little bit, because we have people watching from different parts of the world? What's the situation like in the Philippines?
All right. I think it's best to start in March. Around February, there have been COVID cases in the Philippines. The Philippines was the first recorded death out of COVID outside China. And it was rapidly increasing. That started in the first week of February. By mid March, or early March, like first week of March, there were 2 recorded cases less than a kilometer away from the museum. So we thought that it was best to help to contribute by closing down the museum early, and we closed down the museum 3 days before the Philippine government declared a lockdown. So in a way, we were quite prepared, somewhat. We released the salaries of the staff early. We even gave them a little um, a little more to tide them over because we were expecting a 2 week lockdown uh, to get- to to just stall stall the spread. But the 2 week lockdown that we were preparing for lasted for 4 months, and it's still continuing. So we're very unlike other places. And during the lockdown, museums have been closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, our situation. Mm.
UNESCO mentioned that around 90% of museums temporarily closed due to COVID, and that's around 85,000 museums across the globe.
Yes. And we're very unique because we're a private art museum and we are self funded. In other words, our operations actually relies on us open. We're not like other museums with endowment funds or corporations to support them. So that
But you don't have admission fee. You removed that fairly recently or last year. You
last
removed
year, last year,
last year. You removed that. So where do you get funding to finance the operation?
we are among the new breed of museums that are exploring alternative economic models. We rely primarily on authenticating artworks by Juvenal Sanso, as well as by selling merchandise. We were able to support ourselves last year with no help from anyone by these two income sources, and we were able to open the museum for free so that anyone can come. Um, Despite that, though, we were able to have some savings. We were able to prepare for 4 months of lockdown.
Wow.
Enough, yeah, enough for us. Unlike other museums that were either closed and stopped giving salaries to their workers, we continued our operations online. By the first week of the ECQ, we were able to upload a 360-degree view of the museum, which we prepared prior to the COVID pandemic for a different reason.
Oh, okay. So this was not planned because of COVID. It was something that was already being worked on. And what was that reason?
Yes, Fundacion Sanso is out of the way. Unlike other museums that are in commercial areas, you have to really make a trip to Fundacion. So what we did, our strategy was to create 360 videos to bring the museum to schools. And, and we
Oh,
also started with augmented reality last year so that we can bring the museum to students. So when the lockdown happened, we were quite prepared in that sense. We were among the very first museums to have online exhibitions here in the Philippines. And
mhm.
in the second and third week of the lockdown, understanding how how do you say this? A lot of people were very concerned, afraid. We were able to give them some activities like coloring books that are for free online and mental health talks with our partners,
It's
also for
very
free.
it's very interesting that you are a small museum. You have staff. How many staff do you have?
A
Six.
total, no, we've increased the number of the museum staff since last year. We are now 10 in the museum.
Or to be able to be so quick to respond to the change. That's quite impressive. We've been getting questions about, you mentioned the exhibitions you do outside of Fundacion Sanso. So here's one question from Fiona. Hi, Fiona and Mika. I'd love to know more about the exhibitions you take to schools. Who initiates these? And is it the museum or the school? And what types of exhibition are these? I'm not sure if you brought physical exhibitions to school. Yes. Have you?
Well, we were supposed to. We were in the process of talks, but we were able to bring our exhibitions to malls, the physical exhibitions to malls. What we did was create movable panels where there's a lock on the panel so that during the day, we just bring out the G-clay, very faithful reproductions of the artworks of Juvenal Sanso. We put them out, We have our activities and activations, and during the night, we lock them all up inside the panels. So we really prepared that for the schools. However, we were supposed to and we actually partnered with the local government of San Juan, the city government, and we were supposed to open another exhibition at the city hall the week
Uh,
of the lockdown.
um, and here's another question from Ella, who's based in New Zealand.
Hi, Ella.
She's keen to understand the public response to, you know, outreach exhibitions of museum, because Fundacion Sanso, it's not the only museum that has been bringing art exhibitions and other exhibitions to malls in the Philippines. And let's just provide a little bit of context here. The
Sure.
Philippines has a lot of malls, and for whatever reasons, Filipino people like hanging out in malls. Hanging out keyword, sometimes we just really are not even shopping or dining, we just like malls apparently. And I remember this even during the early days of my career at Ayala Museum. We would have exhibitions and activities in the malls, um, and I suppose the rationale for that is, you know, bring art or bring museums to where the people are. So you can't miss a big exhibition that is in the middle of a mall. So if they can't come to your museum for whatever reason, then bring it to them. Do you have other feedback about that?
Okay. My feedback is that here in the Philippines, public spaces are very limited. Unlike other countries that enjoy parks or other public spaces, a lot of the people here just go to the malls because it's air conditioned, it's open. Yeah, and there's a negative perception among the middle class and the lower classes here in the Philippines that museums are only for rich people. And that is what we are working hard to work against, because we believe that art is for everyone and museums are for everyone. That is why we go to the malls, we go to schools, so that people can experience that museums are actually fun, and museums are places where you can learn and enjoy and, yeah, just relax.
I've been
Feedback. Okay.
asked before
Feedback.
how.
Our feedback. Yeah. So our feedback, we had an activity, for example, in SM Mega Mall, which is one of the largest malls here in Manila. And during our stay, our whole week stay in the mall, an estimated number of around at least 6,000 visited us physically in our site, and around 80,000 were able to see and observe us from around the fringes. That's a very, very moderate estimate. Our
Modern.
normal capacity in Fundacion Sanso is, our normal visitorship is only 30 people per month.
Would
Yes.
it, has the visitorship increased when you remove the admission fee?
Yes, because it's not just because of the admission fee, though. It's also because of our programs. We've started creating programs that cater to needs of our target audiences. So we have several target audiences. Number one, museum workers. Number two, college students to around 40-year-old people who enjoy art. And those people usually have needs that we have already pre-identified. So we always have monthly exhibitions, but also other the Senso Idea programs that cater to the needs of our audiences that are not related to the exhibitions. And these are the programs that people come to. For
Yeah.
example, fundraising for museum workers, or mental health talks like love and depression, mourning, grieving. All of these talks we were able to accommodate, and we were able to bring in for each talk. We usually accommodate between 70 to 100 people. So we are able to increase our visitorship.
And I think that's an excellent way to, as and you mentioned this earlier, that there's this perception in a large number of Filipinos that museums are only for the rich people. Museums are only for the educated. There's that elitist view of museums, and having programs that are not um, strictly just on art and museums invites those people who would probably never visit museums and creates a space for them to introduce them to, oh, hey, it's actually not a bad place. I actually enjoy going to this museum. So we create those avenues, those opportunities for more to expand our audience. Now, we've been talking about exhibitions, and we've collaborated on several exhibitions. Um, while we were both at Lopez Museum, so we worked at Ayala Museum together, and then after, was it 15 years, we worked again together at Lopez Museum, and we co-curated exhibitions. Um, the different exhibitions get organized or curated in different ways. Let's start with was it complicated? Complicated.
Trajectory.
Complicated was an exhibition with Leslie De Chavez.
Peter Chavez, dancer
My,
choreographer Aya Torado, and Mike Adrao, visual artist.
okay, I was supposed to show photos of the exhibition, but having some technical difficulties. But what I really liked about working at the Lopez Museum, and I think this practice we inherited from previous curators, is that Lopez Museum doesn't only have a collection of art paintings and sculptures, but it's also a library with archives, with rare books, and some other materials. And when we create exhibitions, we draw from that broad collection and try to um, encourage a conversation between the contemporary artists and the collection of the museum. So the artists respond through their own art with the existing objects in our collection. But let's walk us through a little bit about how that comes about. What happens first? Do you get an idea? Do you
Yeah. Remember when we created Complicated together, we started out by looking into the very DNA of the museum. What was the museum about? When the founder of the museum, Eugenio Lopez Sr., created the museum, it was all about Philippine culture. It was founded in the 1950s, and he sort of how do you say this? He really focused on collecting artworks, memorabilia, books, newspapers that chronicled the growth of Philippine culture. And the two of us decided that we can have a series of exhibitions that explored the identity of the Filipinos because we have been colonized for 300 plus years by several countries like Spain, briefly by the United Kingdom, then America, and then the Japanese. So that was how Complicated came about. Facebook was also becoming a very popular platform, and there was this status complicated. So we were
the
trying to navigate.
it's about naming the exhibition complicated, right? People
Yeah,
were their eyebrows. Really, you name your exhibition complicated, but it encapsulates the relationship we have, the history of the Philippines. It really is complicated. It continues to become complicated, and we unpack. We explored so many of those issues, and during the exhibition, we Mike Adrao were responded to the map collection and created. I'm really disappointed I couldn't show the photos. She created 6 feet high, intricate drawings um, of in response to the map collection. Aya Torado, who is a choreographer. And so here's the very interesting part about Complicated also is that we didn't just invite visual artists, which is traditionally who would go into an exhibition. Aya Torado is a ballerina and a dance choreographer. She herself, aside from creating a production, she also collaborated with somebody to create a video that responds to the España y Filipinas, one of the crowning jewels of the Lopez Museum collection, right?
Yeah. Uh, all of them had very strong critical practices. That was why we sort of chose them. A, Leslie de Chavez, who also happened to be one of our workmates from Ayala Museum, yeah, created a body of work over the years that focused on the way language shaped the way we think. And he was also very critical of colonialism. Ea Torado was always very critical in her work of the systems that govern our Philippine society. And Mike Adrao always had, who was mentored by Bobby Valenzuela, curator Bobby Valenzuela, also had a very critical edge. So all three of them were chosen for that and were given free reign to explore the collections and focus on something and then react. So that really invigorated the collections, which were more than 100 years old.
And when we started doing that, we began by talking to inviting individual artists and sitting down with them to to explain what we had in mind. And then there was several months of
A
them
year.
just a year.
Yeah, we had a
See,
year.
a year for them to work on the exhibition pieces. And for the meantime, in the museum, we also went about selecting different works from the different collections that will be installed in the exhibition. And because we have a conservation center, well, Lopez has a conservation center. Part of the work that we did after identifying the objects that will be exhibited was to check if they were they could be exhibited, the condition of the works, and if they are not ready for exhibition, what happens?
We had enough time to prepare. So we bring them to the laboratory and they take care of it so that it can be ready for exhibitions.
And so that all goes into the timeline. And while we're doing that, had we also plan around the exhibition. Sorry, the public programming, and at the same time, we started giving out teasers, marketing. So everything everything's happening almost simultaneously. As soon
Yeah.
as we have everything locked down, we have the artists. Everything gets organized within a few weeks of confirming with artists until exhibition launch, and then for a few months while the exhibition is ongoing. So that's one way of organizing an exhibition that we did. But we also did trajectories. This was the first exhibition we did together.
Yes.
And
Our first.
this came about because
I
you
think,
remember.
yeah, when we started trajectories, we were responding to the museum as an institution. How are things collected? Why are things collected? And then we realized the logic behind the collections, and that the logic was building up into Philippine identity on the one hand, but it also spanned the history of the Philippines from the 16th century up to the 21st century. So it was very, very accessible, and it was a way to introduce Philippine art history. So that was
Yeah.
how we came up with trajectories, right?
Trajectories was one of the major reasons for trajectories was one, we haven't actually, as an institution, we haven't had an opportunity to show a large part of the collection. But also, I wanted to do an appreciation, a series of talks about the history, art history in the Philippines. And we didn't have enough works to cover all the periods. So we worked together with Ateneo Art Gallery, and we covered from pre-Hispanic period to contemporary art. And I think it was 8 different
Yeah.
sessions with different speakers. And we used Trajectory, the exhibition, as a backdrop for showcasing. Instead of just talking about it, we were showing what these actual works were, and we asked the speakers to talk about the objects that are on display.
I think that's one of the things that distinguishes Philippine museums from other museums is that we usually collaborate with other institutions. Here in Manila, we know what museums are strong at, and we usually try to augment the limited capacity of our museums by partnering with other museums or other institutions, right?
Right, right. And I think that's what I found about museums. It's a very supportive community. Like, no, I have 6 people who immediately said yes to, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you about, about the work I do. Or I talk to friends and colleagues from different parts of the world, asking them questions about. Sometimes you encounter questions in your work that you don't know the answers to, and I always find that someone is always willing to lend a helping hand, have suggestions, and I love that about the industry. Now, um, I've mentioned that you had different roles in over the years, but let's talk about what brought you to the museum practice. You have an undergraduate degree in anthropology,
Anthropology.
and the thing is with you, one thing I really admire about you is the breadth and the depth of your engagement with creative work. You sing opera, right? You say, guys, ask me about his links. I'll send you links. It's all in YouTube. You also you do prints. You printmaking. You at some point you even had you set up a business on terrarium, right? And whenever you give out gifts, I don't want to open gifts that you give to me because they're just so beautiful. So I'm just wondering, was it a sort of a natural path for you to find your way into museums?
Well, thank you. On the one hand, Ethel, thank you for being so generous about your praise. But on the other hand, I'm so embarrassed because, yeah, I sort of tend to keep the other side of my life away from the public limelight. But thank you anyway. So, well, when I started with my degree in anthropology, it sort of gave me paradigms and lenses with which to understand anything that is cultural. When I graduated in 1999, it was the height of the Asian crisis, and it was so hard to get a job anywhere. I really didn't know how to find a job. I applied for several positions. Um, Sometimes there would be 800 of us applying for one position, and I would spend 3 weeks only to be narrowed down to the last two, and then it won't be me. And I just somehow ended up with Ayala Museum, and they had an opening which was vacant for several months, someone to do the inventory. And I thought it was a great idea because I love culture. I love anything that is Filipino. So I applied. It was just for a project that was supposed to be for 2 months. And I had to inventory more than 3,000 objects, which some of which didn't even have their catalogs or data to. And the project dragged on for 6 months. Yeah, I was underneath. Remember, I was in the basement. There was no aircon. There was little light. It was dusty from being there for more than 10 years. No one visiting it. No one really caring for it.
Finding objects that were not even in the catalog, like, what's this?
Yeah. So,
Where did it come from?
yeah,
What
there's so many.
was what were talking about objects? What was the most interesting, or intriguing object that you have handled or worked on?
Well, remember, I was fresh out of college back then. So I was probably, what, 20 years old? Probably, no? Uh, I had to handle several human remains.
Oh,
Um, yeah, the Ayala Museum has several skulls and several teeth that are wrapped in gold because that was the culture of our uh, uh, the pre-colonized cultures of several uh, groups here in the Philippines. So I I was very uncomfortable in a way about how to handle them because I know that this was a person, and I was always weighing whether this should be included as an object or should this be at that time there were no guidelines yet. So
yeah,
as yeah, as a collections manager and registrar, I had to confront things that are already like the physical care of the object, but at the same time the ethics
yeah.
of collection. So yeah, so I think that was one of the most, no, some of the most intriguing objects in the collections. Teeth that had gold hammered into them, and human skulls. Yeah, with gold masks on them.
And just go back to this one. There was, even though your degree was anthropology, there was no way you were prepared for that kind of work. It's very confronting, isn't it? And the thing with the Philippines, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we still that we have museum studies as a degree in the Philippines. We have art management, we have curation, right?
Yeah.
Um, but we don't have museum studies. We definitely don't have museum education. That's why I had to go somewhere else to do that. But because of that lack of training, we sort of we've been finding a community of highly willing people to share their expertise, and you've been one of them who has been very generous with sharing your experience, your knowledge to other practitioners across the Philippines. And I always find that when we do this, we did a workshop funded by, we did several workshops funded by UNESCO, attended by, it was three workshops done over the course of 3 years. And we had practitioners, over about 200 museum practitioners and heritage practitioners attend. And I found that um, I was one of the facilitators and speakers and organizer, but I always learned something new from them because the diversity of the collection and experiences are just so varied, right?
Yeah, remember, you were right. At the time that we graduated, there were still no museum studies, there were no formal training for people like us, and we had to rely on the generosity of other museum workers to learn. And at the same time, the internet was not yet it's not yet a thing back then. So remember, we didn't when you go to the websites, the search engines, it you would only find like 8 entries or not at all. So we were of that generation. So we relied on the generosity of other museum workers who came before us, as well as other specialists from other fields like doctors, carpenters.
And the references that we had were all Western references, right? Majority
Yeah,
were Western. and they're not exactly all applicable in our context. Like in, for example, in collections care, and I think your work in Call Asia program highlights this, is different regions, different contexts, taking care of collections in different climates, they they have to be, they can't be the same, right?
Yeah,
um
yeah,
Joy Peng just told us that we have museum studies in UP Diliman. Oh, great.
yeah.
I know that. um
Anyway, going to your point, yes, ICROM, the conservation center in Rome, was very forward thinking. In terms of collections care, we always had to rely on Western sources, and we had to rely on Western materials, which are very expensive because we had to import them. And for private museums practitioners like us, it wasn't really practical. So Call Asia was very, very handy because it allowed us um, how to test for materials that are suitable and locally available. And it gave us the critical thinking and the know-how to adapt. So yeah.
so what do you find is most thrilling or most fulfilling about working in the GLAM world?
I
Difficult.
learned so much every day, and I've been working, like we have been working for what, 21 years in the museum sector, and there's no day that I do not go home with something new in mind.
And I think there are just some people, because our relationship goes beyond the professional relationship. We are friends. We travel together, and where do we go? We go and heritage sites, right? And
During we
yeah,
take small breaks within the work week to go to the beach.
go to the beach and then squeeze in a visit to museums
Gallery.
and churches. And I remember when we both just came back from living overseas. You were in Singapore for a time, and I was studying in the US. We went gallery hopping because
Yeah.
we felt that we needed to reconnect, and we would spend until after midnight talking to artists in their studios. I really enjoyed that. But you also drag me into certain activities, like remember the art criticism workshop that you convinced me was such a good idea.
Wasn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I was fresh from grad school, and I thought I was left behind writing at 5 a.m. to meet a 9 a.m. deadline for an essay. And then there I was again, and I was cursing, oh, Ricky, I'm never going to trust you again. Why do you have to drag me into this?
Yeah,
But
but yeah, wasn't it good though? Because we got to know. You were in the US for like what, 4 years? I was
no,
in
2.5. That's it,
two
feel
and a
that.
half. 2.5. Sorry, I was also in Singapore for about the same time, and getting to know art as it was developing, contemporary art as it was developing, and then seeing it from the other side, like from the institutional side, it sort of rounded us, right? And it helped me prepare for this role right now. Hmm.
And and I think one of the strongest suit that we have is the network that we develop and nurture. I think that's one of the reasons why um, you have been so effective in your line of work, is because you have a broad network. It's not just because you need something from them, but because you can also give back something to them and contribute to the industry. um, I'm just looking at questions. There's a question here from Nina, who's from Melbourne. Hi, Nina. Um, Aside from the 360 views, what other opportunities are you exploring now during the lockdown, that you are able to offer to the public?
Well, thank you, Nina, for the question. aside from the 360 view posts that we've been making, we were able to translate an exhibition that was slated for the physical museum into an online exhibition through the curator, Dayang Iraula. She is the first recipient of our curatorial grant, Fundacion Sanso's first curatorial grant program. And she was able to successfully translate the exhibition that was supposed to be in the museum to an online exhibition. And we were very lucky because our artists, the artists that she chose, Annie Tacania, Tad Ermitanio, Rubber Ink, Children of Cathode Ray, are all very savvy with video and sound. So it really just fell into place. Aside from that, we have programs, still mental health programs, and we also continue with our merchandise. We don't see merchandise as
Now, right?
we
But
created, yeah, we develop new products. We don't see it only as a commercial venture. We think of it more as us reaching out to our audiences and letting them know of the work of Jovenel Sanso, getting them interested. So yeah, it's nonstop. And aside from that, during the short brief period that we had a general community quarantine, we were able to go on site and do our inventory and continue with our authentication services.
we were also doing that in my work at the Museum of Chinese Australian History until we got the stage 4 was imposed, so no staff member allowed in the museum. But for the previous months, we were focusing on the collection. And like you, it was a very interesting experience to actually be able to find objects and check on the status of the 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 objects that we are taking care of. Now, what we've talked about thrills and joys of working in the museum field. What do you find is a very challenging, something challenging that two or three most challenging about being in museums?
Well, funding is always a challenge, especially for museums like us. But you know what? I always enjoy the challenge. And so far, during the lockdown, it made us more focused on what we are good at: authentications, merchandising. So we did not stop those things, even though the museum is on lockdown. And as a result, we have been able to uh, gather enough resources again so that if another very strict lockdown happens, we can still last for another 4 months. So that's one thing. It always keeps me motivated to work harder.
Um, this one is a tricky question. I get asked this. Ghosts in museums. There are ghosts in museums.
I think our culture is one that believes in ghosts and actually acknowledges their presence. And the museum where I am right now, well, even in Ayala Museum, I think I've personally uh, experienced ghosts.
Oh, one of the ghosts in Ayala Museum has a name, Melody, and she likes using the typewriter.
Well, Melody. Let's just assume that her name is Melody. Every time I sort of work overtime, remember our days at Ayala usually lasted for more than what was on paper. That was
Mm-hmm.
the norm, right? And there were days that I sort of overstayed, and all the lights will just go off except for my computer. So I will always just acknowledge, all right, Melody, thank you for the day. Go ahead. We'll see you tomorrow.
Melody was reminding me to go home. Other people, other colleagues and staff members of the museum and the foundation tell me about Melody because, I used to oversee after our um, art workshops that are run from 6 to 9 p.m. And
Yes.
so it's not, I'll be there until 9:30 or even 10 o'clock. And then I get reminded, oh, have you seen Melody? And I just say, nope, I'm closing my third eye, not interested in meeting Melody. But we, I always have this conversation with different museum colleagues and non-museum friends. I think that because spirits latch onto objects, and we do have old objects or objects that are owned by people who are now deceased. I think it's not impossible for that to happen. And in fact, at the museum I currently work for, we have burial objects. so so walking around doing inspection while we're on shutdown, it's a little bit, I'd call someone and have them on the phone just so I don't feel alone. But that's just me.
But
Other people don't agree.
yeah, our culture is very receptive to things like this. Other people would probably just dismiss it as nonsense, but it also helped me in my work. Remember that when we started at Ayala, my work was primarily collections care, right?
Hmm.
And I sort of remember all of the objects under my care until now, until today. There
Wow.
was there was one day that I woke up very early, so it was around 5, but I have to go to work at around 6:30. So I sort of dozed back again, and then when I slept, I had a very weird dream. The limestone burial jar, the head of Borak, the ritual object, and another ritual object sort of told me, "Don't go to work yet. Go to work after lunch. We are all safe. Don't worry." So that was such a weird dream. I woke up, got my coffee, put on the TV. There was a coup d'etat happening. Remember that at the hotel?
While the museum was temporarily at the mall.
No, no, we were still at the old museum. Yeah,
Old
there was
museum.
a coup d'etat at the hotel at the intersection of Ayala and Makati, which was just half a kilometer away.
See, whoever said, life in working for museum is tame. We have exciting lives.
Yeah, you
Um,
remember?
Go ahead, Ricky. I think
Yeah,
it's
remember?
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
remember there was another time. There was another time. There was an explosion at the mall.
And was this when we were at the mall already, temporarily?
Yeah, so
Ah,
it's very exciting.
Um, was I going to say? Yeah, it's good for of you to point out that some cultures will probably find belief in spirits and ancestors strange, if not nonsense. But you're right, it's deeply rooted in our culture, right? The respect for those who have departed. And that has carried over, even with the arrival of Spain. They tried to stamp out the pre-colonial culture of the shamans and being
but,
more attuned to nature.
but as a museum worker, it really helped me a lot because I believe that every object has a sort of a history that I should be respecting. And it's one of the cornerstones of museums, right? So,
Right, exactly. That we have to respect the objects that are entrusted into our care. And
yeah,
when we respect these objects, um, we are able to tell their stories when we show them to the general public, right?
yeah,
So it goes,
yeah.
that's why we take care of the objects for future generations. And yeah, okay. Maricel, hi Mamu. Maricel, I don't know if there are ghosts in the Mamu is Maricel Montero is the director of the Children's Museum in the Philippines. I don't know if there are ghosts in Museo Pambata. Um, I think we have. Um, I wanted to end with a question about what we see, what's happening with COVID. It's undoubtedly a devastating it has devastating impact on GLAM institutions across the globe.
Yeah.
Um, UNESCO foresees about 12,000 museums will not, open again after COVID. But I think that it is also a good opportunity to um, reevaluate and reevaluate how we do things before COVID and reimagine the different roles that we play in society. But aside from that, it's pushing us out of our comfort zone. We have to respond to what's going on. Many institutions have struggled but have successfully transitioned from physical exhibitions to virtual exhibitions. Some museums have been working closely with schools to bring activities to them now that they are not able to visit museums for field trips. Do you see other silver lining to this?
Well, yeah, for us, this is a crisis situation, and Filipinos are very, very, uh, how do you say it? We are always on crisis situations. So we're very adaptive. For Fundacion Sanso, our first priority was really to get our staff safe. And then our next priority was to reach out to our audiences. And one of the ways that we were able to reach out was by partnering with commercial galleries in order to raise funds for our frontliners, the medical frontliners, and we were able to buy them several tents. Some of the we were able to buy two hospitals, several tents for them to treat their COVID patients. I think that museums should not be so rigid right now in what they think they are responsible for. We are part of a greater community, and we should act it.
Yes. And I think those institutions that refuse to respond to the times and insist on standing still will be left behind in the past.
Yes.
Right. Next, so before I start thanking you, Ricky, I wanted to say that next on Tuesday, so this is a series of talks that I have scheduled Tuesdays and Saturday. This coming Tuesday, we are talking to Anisa Gultom, who is based in UAE, United Arab Emirates. Have you been to the Middle East? You have, right? Simam.
Yeah.
I've
Understand
never
one.
I've never been to the Middle East. I've never seen a museum except in pictures in the Middle East. And so Nisa is also someone I've known for over a decade. We both studied in the US for our masters in museums. And we will attempt to have her give a walking tour of her museum to our audience. So that's happening on Tuesday, same time, 3 p.m. Melbourne, 1 p.m. Manila. And I hope you also can tune in. And with that, do you have any last messages to
Okay.
our audience, Ricky?
Okay, first off, I'd like to thank those who joined us this afternoon for the duration of the hour talk. Thank you so much. And a lot of them are museum workers. I hope you're all safe and you're all functioning where you are. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'd also like to thank our staff at Fundacion Sanso who have been very, very gung ho about this whole situation and we're able to adapt with this, like we're on a moving thing and they're able to adapt and we're able to serve our audiences. And lastly, thank you so much, Ethel, for being so generous, creating this platform, inviting me over. and sharing all of these learnings that we have that are official and non-official with our glam community. And working with you for the longest time has always been such a pleasure, and I really, really look forward to working with you again, hopefully in more projects in the future. Thank you.
Yes, yes to more projects and more collaborations because we've been working on collaboration. We've been working collaboratively even when we are in different continents, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
never, time and space never seem to be an issue with us. All right. So again, thank you so much, Ricky, for
Maraming
giving us
salamat.
your time today, being candidly open about your practice and not leaving the conversation when I started talking about your other interests. Um, and everyone else who joined us today, thank you so much. And I hope I see you again on Tuesday and the succeeding schedule. We have a great lineup. So Tuesday is Anissa. On Saturday next week, we have Justine Hanna, who is a librarian here in Melbourne, and she will talk about the secret lives of librarians. What's that? For the meantime, take care, everyone. Be kind to each other and also be kind to yourself. Bye.